Okay, we are on. So, good morning, everyone, and good evening to all my employees and customers around the globe. In the wake of major social and political changes around the globe over the past decades, many companies are taking steps to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, the progress in most sectors remains very slow. There are many programs designed to increase diversity and inclusion in the workplace, but they often fail. So that leads to a fundamental question: why is it important and why companies are not able to adopt it to the extent it is required? I am Swami Sri Parambadur, CIO of Infomerica, an organization which is providing innovative solutions to complex business problems using cutting edge technology and working with customers spread across North America, Europe, and Asia. And now I'd love to introduce our guest speaker, Jennifer Martinez, who will be giving us the secret sauce of leaders' role in creating equitable, inclusive cultures that sustain diversity. Jennifer is the president and founder of Leap and Inspire Global LLC, an organization focused on helping individuals and organizations achieve their full potential through coaching, consulting, and development. Jennifer's passion is in helping organizations do the hard work required to become inclusive and equitable, and helping individuals in traditionally underrepresented groups identify and break through the barriers they confront in their leadership journeys. Prior to forming Leap and Inspire, Jennifer was Senior Vice President of Research, Evaluation, and Societal Advancement at the Center for Creative Leadership. Of course, I attended that when I was in Verizon. So, and in her almost 26-year plus career, Jennifer contributed to its growth through her evidence-based focus on evaluation, design, facilitation, coaching, writing, and speaking. And Jennifer is also co-authored with Portia Mount a book called Kick Some Glass: 10 Ways Women Succeed at Work on Their Own Terms, which aims to empower women to break through their proverbial glass ceiling and move towards understanding and attainment of their unique definition of success. Jennifer, of course, holds a PhD in psychology. That's why she is able to come up with so much information to all of us. So, welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for coming here and giving some very valuable tips to all the leaders across the globe on this important topic called diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Swami. I'm very much looking forward to the time that we're going to spend together today, and know that that you've got some questions that we've planned to address, and then we will take questions from the audience as well. It is an absolutely critical topic at this time. It has been, but organizations are paying more attention to it now than they have in the past, right?
That's absolutely, that is very true. So let me just start with one simple question. Diversity and inclusion is not new. It's been there for several years. But why is it taking in the front seat now when everywhere it is all pandemic and all, but suddenly we are seeing D&I has become more in forefronters, and I am seeing many companies around the globe are adding more and more positions. So can you please elaborate why is it becoming suddenly a forefront?
Yeah, so it's been on the radar screen for many organizations for many years, and in fact, I've got let me pull it up here. I've got a slide that shows. Let me just quickly pull this up. Where is it? That shows some of the companies that have been really doing wonderful work in the diversity and inclusion space for many years. And so this is Diversity Inc.'s top 50 companies for diversity, 2020. So you can see, the organizations that have been doing really significant work. And if you go to this report, which I would encourage your viewers to do, you can see the kind of work that each of these organizations is doing. So, it's been on the, it's been part of the strategy for many organizations for many years. And yet for others, it is much newer. It's been more of a check the box kind of initiative where organizations know that they need to do some diversity and inclusion work, but they put somebody in charge of it, but they haven't necessarily funded that role or given it influence. So there's one position in an organization buried somewhere down in the organization. But one of the things that's happened recently is this several initiatives that started based on current events. So let me walk through a few of these. CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion is a collective of organizations focused on creating more diversity, more inclusion in organizations. And it was actually started in 2018 after PwC's Botham John, one of their employees, was murdered in his apartment by an off-duty police officer who thought that she was in her apartment and accidentally, killed him.
Huh?
And so what PwC did at the time was they said, we organizations have got to take more responsibility for helping people understand difference and diversity and not being threatened by people who are different from us. And so they created CEO Action, which now has several hundred organizations as a part of it. In 2016, Paradigm for Parity was launched, and that was focused on creating parity between men and women in leadership roles in organizations. And again, that's another collective of organizations that are doing work together. They've got some principles that they're trying to work toward, and that member companies need to sign a pledge.
That's true.
And so they are trying to take steps to create parity in gender. Now, those have been in existence a few years. What we're seeing right now this year is what is the result of organizations trying to take a more proactive role through the Black Lives Matter movement here in the US, but also globally. And prompted, of course, by the murder this summer of George Floyd and of Breonna Taylor and of others, unfortunately. And organizations want to get behind the Black Lives Matter movement, but they've been called out for not, it's not enough to put up a pledge and say, I support it. It's that organizations are being called out by either their customers or their organization members as, okay, that's fine, that's great. But what you need to do is you really need to do things differently internally. So how are you going to be serious about it? So I think part of what we're seeing right now is organizations being pushed to really commit to efforts of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and not just put the language out there that says that they support it.
I know. I think I really see a good way of putting this, CEO in action. I think that is important. As you mentioned, the action towards what is happening is important. And I am very unfortunate, and also we feel very bad about knowing these situations that unnecessarily a lot of these things, like everybody is now becoming a Black Lives Matter, but instead of just saying or pledging, as you rightly said, we need to see that in action. And for that, so what do you think about what is actually a diversity and inclusion leadership means?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So let's break that down, right? And let's add equitable into it. And so
you always like equitable, don't you?
I do, because the term that we've used for so many years is diversity and inclusion, and people understand that as trying to get toward a diverse set of employees and or leaders, but the sustainability of that diversity won't happen unless the organization is also equitable and inclusive. And so let's talk about that for a minute. And so
Sure.
some people like to use metaphors. So I've got a metaphor here for us. So diversity is when, this is the metaphor of a party or a dance, right?
Yeah,
Diversity is when everybody's invited to the party, right? We want everybody there.
absolutely.
Equity means that everybody gets to contribute to the playlist. So if it's equitable and the playlist includes stuff that I enjoy, then I feel like I'm welcome there. Inclusion means that everybody has a chance to dance. So that could mean that the dancing needs to give space for wheelchairs, right? So
Yeah.
dancing means different things. Sustained diversity happens when everybody at the party feels that it's really for them and that they belong, and that requires equity and inclusion. And one more graphic to share with you is this one that I like from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. People talk about equity and equality, and are they the same, right? So equality would be, okay, everybody's got a bike. But as you can see in the top part of this image, that bike only works for one person.
Yeah.
What looks like to be a woman on the second in from the right, it's not going to work for the other three people. It doesn't fit for them. Equity is when we give them all bikes that work for them, that work for their physical nature, right? And so then think about the equity on the dance floor and the inclusion on the dance floor. It's got to work for everybody. So the equity is a really critical part of that equation.
No, I think you really summed up very well, and I think this graphics is really depicts very well, because I did not really think about the equity that way. But I think once you have given the two examples, it is very evident. It's not only about embracing the diversity and you are also including, but if the equity is not there, it looks like we are missing the puzzle, because
Right.
you are not allowing everyone to be part of their playlist. So I think it's a fantastic point. I mean, I did not think that way. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So
there are all kinds of, I didn't put this one in the deck, but there are lots of visuals that
mhm,
people use. There's even a video that I've seen that talks about equitable practices, and how, you may have two people starting to run a race.
mhm,
One person's lane is completely clear. The other person's running lane has potholes and rocks and alligators and so forth. So whereas they both are going the same distance, the barriers that get put up for them are different. And so it keeps some people from moving down through that race as quickly as others.
wow, no, I think this is fantastic. It really opened up my eyes. I was just trying to,
Yeah,
feel the real meaning of it after looking at the graphics. I'm just trying to absorb. So, I mean, I did not
right.
think that way, but thanks for enlightening. Appreciate it. And I think we have few more. Many folks have joined on the YouTube and also on our Zoom session. So I really appreciate everybody, tuning in. And then please feel free to send your questions on YouTube chat or on the Zoom chat. We have our Bala, who is going to be managing the chat, and then he will be telling us. It is going to be more and more interactive session, so it is more a conversational
Hmm.
discussion. What we are doing, it's not a very serious discussion. The goal here is we want to really bring up all the key points in the diversity and the inclusion, and how, as a community, we all can really work towards making it happen, because the
Yeah,
change in the world has to start with us.
that's
And
right.
someone else will not come and do the change. So that's why we have this.
Exactly.
Now, this leads to a very wonderful discussion, Jennifer. So we are saying, yes, it is very important. You also talked about the diversity and inclusive leadership. But when we are looking at the numbers,
Hmm.
in the organization, we don't have diverse representation and leadership at mid-level and above.
Right.
But when we propose targeted development program for specific audiences, like an example, it could be women or people of color, or it could be diversity, comes in a different things, right?
Hmm.
And we are told that we need to invest in all of our potential leaders. So what exactly we have to do? How do we really make this happen?
Yeah. So let me share another image that helps us understand. And I see my video panel in front of the graphic. Is that in front of yours or no? It's not
No,
blocking your graphic.
no.
Okay, that's fine. So this is the most recent graphic from McKinsey and Corporation and the Lead In Foundation. They've done 6 years of this study where they've looked at the percentages of men and women and both white and people of color across multiple stages of leadership. And so
Hmm.
to your point, we don't see that, that pipeline does not carry forth in the same way where it starts. At the entry levels, you tend to have roughly the same amount of men and women. It varies a little bit by industry, and we can follow up on that later, but it's roughly the same. But then as you move through the pipeline, we have fewer and fewer women and fewer people of color in
Yeah.
in senior leadership roles. So what do we do about that, right? So part of it is we need to not blame. We just need to understand why it is, and it is the way it is because organizations, centuries ago, were created for the primary employee and structured in a way that supported and promoted the primary employee, and those were generally white men who had, if they were married, they had wives who worked at home and took care of the children in the home. And so all of the systems that were built to support leaders worked for that kind of person, that kind of leader. And as our society has changed, organizations have not necessarily kept up, and policies have not necessarily kept up.
Hmm.
And so that same sort of way of working, way of moving people through the pipeline, is getting in the way of everyone except for the people it was built for, which were white men. And I like white men. I'm married to one, but
I
it's
know.
the fact is, this is just the truth of how organizations have been built. So it's not that white men need to be ignored.
True.
It's that we need to understand that the kinds of processes that are needed, the programs, the processes, the sponsorship that's needed for anyone to move through a leadership pipeline needs to be targeted to the audiences that haven't been well represented there, because it's not going to happen naturally on its own. So what we
Hmm.
see, for example, is we see organizations. Let me give you one example of a client I worked with who was
Sure.
running a women's leadership program both in South America and in Europe,
Hmm.
but they were hesitant to run it in the US.
Oh, really?
They were, because they were afraid of litigation from men in the organization who would say, well, wait, why isn't there a men's leadership program? And of course, there were leadership programs that were open to men and women, but this one in particular was designed to focus on the barriers that women run into as they move through organizational levels. So what they ended up deciding to do was to offer that exact program, and open it up to men and women and say, great, if you want to join this program, we'd love to have you. And we were going to have to figure out how to make that work, but we were ready to do that. And in the end, no men signed up for it. So it sort of became less of an issue than they had initially anticipated. But it's that feeling that if I'm not being fully inclusive, that I'm
Hmm.
excluding. And the point is, organizations need to figure out how to create the same level of inclusivity and equity for underrepresented groups than that men have had all along.
No, that's a good point. And I think, I mean, this graphics really talks about what McKinsey is presenting. The C-suite is really very almost single digit, and also
Yeah.
good to see maybe with all the things going on around the globe, the change is also much higher from 2015 to 2020. If you look at it, I think it is 22% rise in the C-suite, which is like a phenomenal. Whereas in
Hmm.
other places, it is there. So I
Right.
also saw, do you see any difference of this additional or the change in a right direction in terms of any particular sectors, or because other day when I was watching on the LinkedIn, suddenly somebody say, hey, this is the first woman CFO for a manufacturing company. So
Mm-hmm.
something like they are really saying, I mean, come on, we have been in this world so many years, right?
Yeah.
Even just talk about the USA, it has more than 200 plus years of history. And we are saying, okay, we have a first woman CFO in this industry. So it was, I don't know whether should I say amazed or bizarre.
Right. Yeah. So different industries, and I looked at a couple given your audience as we had talked about. So you've got some industries that struggle to attract women at entry levels, like IT hardware, IT software, telecommunications, right? And so we know that there's an issue of how do we get girls and students, girls when they're students, interested in engineering and technology, right? And really get them interested in going down the path of being in there. So they're having trouble attracting at the entry levels, whereas industries like food manufacturing has
Hmm.
difficulty. They're doing fine getting them in at the entry levels, but they're not attracting them past not advancing them past mid-level. Healthcare is dominated by women at many of the early levels, but they're having a hard time advancing women into senior leadership.
Hmm.
So those industries really need to be looking at what it is they're doing and not doing, and we'll talk about that a little bit. What it is they're doing and not doing to build this pipeline. McKinsey and lean in talk about it as a broken rung, because they
Hmm.
look at around the middle manager level, right? And they're
Yeah.
saying as you're climbing the ladder, there's a rung there that's broken and women can't continue to climb up. Well, what is it that different industries are doing or failing to do at that level so that they're not advancing women and people of color and other underrepresented groups?
Okay. Okay. No, I think thanks for again giving some little bit details on each sector and why this. But then this leads to how do we really design this D&I in an organization?
Yeah.
So even if I am an IT services organization in Informatica, and we are globally spread across North America and Asia and Europe. So if you are going into any particular sector, so is there any kind of a framework you are suggesting?
Hmm.
How do we really design? So can you give a little bit more your experience on how do any organization can design? Because now there is a many portfolios like chief diversity officer role is being added to
Right.
each. Many corporations are adopting. So if I'm a chief
Right.
diversity officer, how do I design this diversity and inclusion in my organization?
Yeah. So the first step is to understand the situation at your given organization, because it's going to vary. So, what does it look like in your organization and what does it look like in your industry? Because the industry then will tell you what kind of pool of talent that you have, proximally available to you, right? So, understand
Hmm.
that. The second step is to start with a senior team. The senior leaders have got to be the champions. They need to understand and support the need to diversify leadership. And I have a case study that I'll share in a minute about what that looks like when
Sure.
it's difficult. Um, this is ultimately about culture change. Again, we could go back to diversity. We can say we have a target of 50% women at senior levels, or we have a target of 50% people of color at senior levels. But unless we are creating the culture that is inclusive and equitable, we can't sustain that diversity. And so it is about culture change. We've got to think about the beliefs and the values and the behaviors that an organization needs to have in order to support and drive those goals. Because frankly, if those aren't there, people see through it
Yeah.
and they don't believe it's just words coming out of a senior team's mouths or a board's mouth. They know that change won't happen because there's not really a lot of effort behind it. So let me give you this case, right? Because this is
Okay.
very, very common. So you've got a CEO who knows he's retiring in 2 years, and
Okay.
he's beginning to work on a succession plan. His senior team has 10 people. 2 of them are
Hmm.
women, 2 are people of color. One is Black, one is Indian. Now, typically, the strong candidates for CEO in the history of this organization have had global experience and they've run a line of business. Now, as the CEO looks at his senior team, the only people with those qualifications are the white men on the senior team. So the women and the people of color have not been developed intentionally to have those backgrounds, right?
I see.
So he's got a choice to make. A solid succession plan would identify several candidates who are deemed ready now. When the CEO announces the retirement, usually CEOs announce their retirement a year or so before, right? To get a good pool of internal and external candidates. So the women and the people of color are not likely, on that senior team, are not likely to be considered good successors unless they can gain those experiences and enough of those experiences in a year's time when the CEO announces that he's leaving. So the organization has a choice. Well, probably three choices. One is the CEO can delay retirement.
Yeah.
And build really, give those people developmental assignments so that they are building capabilities. Another is to plan, to realize that if you're going to use internal successors to succeed this CEO, you won't have the diversity. And so that means looking externally for a diverse set of candidates, which they may need to do. They may also, and I would suggest, look ahead to the next CEO replacement and be preparing that pipeline. So they're doing the work, 4 to 10 years ahead of time. They're looking deeper into the organization to say, who are the high potentials, women, people of color who we'd like to have as CEO succession candidates, and be preparing them now so that next time we come around to a replacement, we're not left with a senior team that has this lack of diversity. Now, one more point on the external hire. If they're going to do an external hire, they can't rely on the same methods or talent pools that they've relied on in the past, because that's gotten them where they are.
Yeah.
And so what they've got to do is they've got to really think about where are the highly talented, because there are plenty of them, the highly talented women and people of color who we'd want to consider for this CEO search. And let's go after those talent pools rather than, saying, okay, we're going to use this particular headhunter because we've always used them and they've always brought us great candidates. Great, but it's not been diverse, right? So how do we really improve our chance of diverse talent pool? So just a few things that they need to think about as they're trying to increase their diversity.
No, I think I think it was very sequential. You brought a really good case study. So as a CEO, really you need to plan out minimum 2 or 3 years of your exit plan and the plan. And if diversity is there, we also need to see how is the board is suggesting or supporting the diversity initiative, right? So we need to think. Right. But that leads to a good question for me. How do we ensure that our recruiting and selection processes are objective, rigorous, and consistent in helping us build a more diverse pipeline of leaders? I know you talked about the CEO alone, but how do we really look at, there are always a senior leadership in the executive and also the entry level, middle level, executive level, the top leadership. So what do you think about the recruiting practices someone has to adopt?
Yeah, it's a similar response, but has some additional ideas. So, one is we need to identify first what's really needed in a candidate to be successful. So not basing it just on the incumbent or who have been strong performers in this sales position in the past, right? Sometimes that's what organizations will do. They'll say, we've got really great sales leaders, and here are the things that they're doing, and here are the schools they came from, or the training that they've had, and that may be true, but it also is limiting because it's going to create an ever shrinking pool of talent around a particular profile. I worked with an organization that used a particular personality profile that's actually been validated for selection. So, it could be used for selection, but the way they used it was they said, all the people who have been successful in these particular sets of roles have had this profile. And then lo and behold, they were surprised. Not really, but some of them were surprised
Yeah, I was
several years.
really, is everyone surprised, or is it a pleasantly surprised, or with a shock?
Well, yeah. So some were surprised. Some were not surprised, but frustrated because they had seen it happening all along. Where in that particular role, they had ended up with people who looked very much alike, and so they were trying to figure out why that was, and they said, oh, well, it's because we're selecting for that particular profile, and it's been limiting us. So you have to look at the purpose of a role that you're selecting for, and look not only within your organization but outside in the industry at what successful incumbents in that kind of role are doing, what their skill sets are, their capabilities, and then write the job description and run your recruiting and selection process based on those capabilities, rather than on what schools somebody attended or networks they're a part of and that kind of thing. There are actually also certain, and you've got to be a little bit careful about this with AI, but there are, yeah, you know what I mean. But there are some platforms that are used to take out some of the bias in selection processes, and to help a selection process be more inclusive, including even when you're writing a job description. So you can get there's certain language that's used that might be attractive to one audience and not to other audiences. And so if you could use a platform that helps you write a more inclusive job description, that's one way. One other suggestion that I have there is that research tells us that if resumes come in and they have the names are ethnic names, they are less likely to be hired than white Christian male sounding names.
Yeah.
And so creating a process by which the names on resumes can be blanked out, so that the hiring committee is seeing the qualifications rather than some of what they may have implicit bias about in terms of the people they're looking at.
No, that's good. So I think you brought up a very good point. So I want to just again talk about a little bit what from the Informatica perspective we are doing. So we have been working with the different agencies in the corporation, state, and federal across different industries across the globe. And then what we have found, many companies are saying, okay, we are interested now in video interviews. So people have started the video interviews. But then again, when you are doing a video interview, you are able to really see the people of color. And then again, you are basically, by looking at the things, some people are already doing a pre-formatted, whether we really want to go ahead or not, the notions are different.
Yeah.
And of course, there are also AI, the artificial intelligence are also doing some things. And then again, artificial intelligence is all about what you give, it will learn over the period of time and it will give. So we thought of discussing with all the different people, and then also to embrace in the diversity and inclusion. What we are doing, again, I just want your feedback and see how it might make sense. So we started something called a cognitive talent acquisition platform, and we named that as a Map Recruit. And in that, what we are doing is first we are creating a persona. So this persona is, okay, if you are looking for a bank manager or a merchandiser or a shelfer, whatever is your persona, define the persona, which again goes back to what you made, the job description. It's not about which university he is coming from, which ethnic he has, that is not required. What we want is, if you want to perform, so for example, if you take a Pepsi product, and if you are planning to do for a cognitive merchandiser, so what you need is, you need a person with the roles and responsibilities of that particular person who really want to pick up the bottles and go to the shop and then shelf it, or whatever is the job description you need to do. So what we are calling it as a persona. And then once you have the persona, then we have created a mechanism which will extrapolate all the resumes without the names only the qualifications, and then we give them the ranking and saying that, okay, now you are asking this job description, and then we are having this resumes. We are matching with the resumes, the content of the resume. What we are saying is attributes. So we have each one as, okay, you should be a good communicator. You should have this particular experience. You should have maybe live in this city because we have the requirement in that particular city, or you are supposed to be relocated. Whatever is very subjective to that particular position, and then we are comparing with what is the job description and the resumes. And once we are creating this ranking, and then what we are saying is, instead of calling as the AI, we are giving a explainable AI. What it means is, we are giving the selection or the ranking of that particular resume matching with the job description, and then we are forming saying that because of these qualities the resume has based on the JD, we are giving you this. So we are not really giving any information on the diversity or the color or any other things, but very subjective. And that is why we are calling as explainable AI, so that we really want to know what it is. So this is what we are implementing. And then I think we are working with some of the federal, state, and the commercial customers. They are very happy. But what is your take on it? Is that, are we?
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic. So what I presume what you're going to end up doing, just to make sure I understand what you're saying, is you'll end up giving them a set of candidates that are selected based on their match to the persona, and then they will go through that set of candidates in their qualifications related to the persona, right? And they may slim down on that some, right? So they may get to a next phase where they do video interviews or something, but the bias has been culled out of those initial phases, right?
Absolutely. And also we added another next phase. What we did is, so the technology is saying, when you are using the RPA or the bot, people say, hey, no, I really want to talk to the human. When you are bringing the human, then you are bringing this diversity, all these questions are coming. So what we are saying is, okay, now I have this mechanism which has extrapolated, and we have selected the resume. Then the first level of screening, I am giving that option to the candidate to call back, and then we have a audio bot or a chat bot or a video bot. Everything is the bot based. Now there is no bias, because the bots are only subjective to those particular question and answers, and it is basically asking a question. And if as I'm just talking, so I'm recording my messages. Now it is only getting the information of thought clarity and how I am really saying the way what I am saying, and also getting the subject of my experience. Now, when I'm saying this information, now I am sending this to multiple people in the HR or talent acquisition. So now there may be a group of talent people from the customer who want to hire this person. So we have already taken out this bias by giving a proper resume. Then we also did a first level of screening using the bot. So now you have all the information is available. We are also giving the explainable AI. So we are hoping now at the second level, the customer will get to see all this information. No bias. It's more about the personas, the resume selection, and the first level of screening. So you have more points and elements to compare. Of course, at the final, we want all the recruitment team or the talent acquisition team to do a more intellectual discussion rather than mundane copying the spreadsheet and all. That's why we are calling it as a more, if I'm Swami, I'm saying Swami plus digital Swami. So I'm more interested to talking to all the people, do my IP based issue, and use my intelligence. Whereas the digital Swami is more about the mundane work or copying spreadsheet and doing that lot of rough work. So with the combination, I am getting a better results, and also removing this kind of a diversity issues or challenges what we are seeing.
The biases,
yeah. What do you think about those?
I think it's fantastic. I'd love to see it. I think that sounds like the kind of thing that organizations definitely need to be investing in going forward.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to, we'll do a separate demo for you, and then we will involve. So I'm glad you like the idea, because you are the expert in this field. We are trying to see what we can do, because we are coming more from the technology point of view, and then how can we marry that technology and this piece. But I have a couple of questions coming from the audience.
Okay.
So one of the question is, again, it is how they think about it and how they say about it, right? So let us say if a white leader want to be part of the solution but are afraid they will say the wrong thing and offend a colleague of color,
Hmm.
how can they build a skill and confidence so that they can become a good allies and partners rather than enemies? Because if I am a white person and then if I'm saying, hey, this is good, but sometimes if I say in a different way, not
Yeah.
knowingly, it
Yeah.
might offend, even though my intention is to support, but the outcome is not really visible.
Right.
What is the some of these techniques you have?
Yeah, this has been tough, I think, over this past year in particular, as organizations and people in general are trying to are trying to be more part of the solution, and yet don't know what to say. So, one thing is organizations need to sponsor sessions,
Hmm.
workshops, and that kind of thing for white people to learn about what's happening, the history of what's happened in this country with regard to people of color of different groups. I mean, I'm not. That's a big term. Let me be clear. People of color is a big term, right? And the history of Black Americans, Indian Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans. It's the history has been different, and so I realize I'm lumping it all together in people of color, but being able to understand um, what the experience has been like for people who are not white in this country is important, and they need to be able to ask questions in a kind of environment where they're not where they can be afraid to ask a stupid question, right? Because if they're trying to learn, if the intent really is to try to learn, they need to have that opportunity to do that. We white people need to be careful not to put the burden on our colleagues of color to teach us. It's not their job to teach us about the experiences they've had. We have to do that homework on our own. Once then we have done, you know, we're always learning. We're
Yeah.
always on a learning journey. But once we've done a significant amount of learning and feel ready for a conversation, then find someone that you trust, right? Somebody who you have a good relationship with. Let them know what you've been learning, and ask them not to teach you, but ask them how you can be supportive of them. Ask them what they need from you, and that's how we can be, allies and partners. And there's one thing that's happening that we've also got to be careful about.
Hmm.
As white people try to get involved in efforts related to racism in our country, in other countries, we need to not make ourselves the center of it. We need to not start new initiatives. We need to support initiatives that are already underway and support the people who have already been involved in those efforts, rather than centering ourselves and making it about us, because it's not. It's about our colleagues of color.
Yeah, I know. So I think you made a good point. See, in our lives, even in the industry terms, when we go for a technology, what we always say, we always, as an Informatica, support a continuous improvement plan, because we
Hmm.
cannot say that this is okay, done deal.
Right.
It is a continuously we need to improve, and that is what we are really have to embrace in the organizations in terms of the training, because it is not that okay, I have gone for one training, I'm done. It
Right.
should be a continuous evaluation. And also there are many elements are coming every year. you know AI was not there, conversational AI was not there, explainable AI was not there, technology was not there probably 3 4 years
Right.
back. I mean, it was really there since long time, but it was never into the
But
surface
not
level where every
mainstream.
not in
Yeah.
the mainstream.
Yeah.
So now when it is happening, if the people are not really going through the training and all, it is really going to be a challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while
Exactly.
we are talking, there was another fantastic question came from one of the chief diversity officer. He doesn't want to name, but the question is, we have established the equity, diversity, and inclusion office, but the demand for their support far surpasses the number of people in the room. So how do we
Yeah.
handle this?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's going to be the case in many organizations, because right now, in the time of COVID, when organizations have contracted their staffing in large part, the funding for any roles, is going to be limited. So you've got a need that is much bigger than it was before, and a smaller funding pool. So I would say one thing is get help, because it is possible to contract with consultants who are doing this work, and have you're not trying to learn how to do it on your own initially, right? You're learning from them, but you're not having to build the plane while you're flying it. So
That's
to
true. I
get
think that most of the organization, that is what is happening. I'm just trying to build a
yeah,
plane. I'm flying, and that's where we are
exactly.
going. Absolutely
Great.
correct.
So get some help. Create a plan and communicate it. So even if you can't execute all of your plan at once, which is unlikely, at least tell the organization, we realize we have an issue and we're going to address it. And these are the steps we're going to take to address it, but it's going to take us some time. And so here's where we are now, and we'll continue, to address it. Another step is to include other people in the organization if you can, because again, this is organizational culture change, and that does include people across the organization, up and down, across all parts. And then finally, I would say join organizations like CEO Action or Paradigm for Parity, because there are resources there. In fact, there are resources there even if you don't join. They've got lots of resources on their websites, but you don't have to create those kinds of programs from scratch. You can learn from the kind of, from the organizations that have been doing it already.
That's right. That's why, it's always good to learn from somebody who has already embraced and they are already been successful. I think it is more about coming out with a clear purpose and the action oriented plan, and then seek out for help. No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one question. What I have been seeing is another biggest ticker, especially in this last 6 months of the COVID. I have been, when working with the different organizations or the new prospects, they are saying, okay, what is your diversity level, which is a good thing they're asking. And I'm also seeing there is an increase or a mandate to some of these organizations to add diversified vendors. So a customer and the vendor relationship, they are keeping a loop of the diversity vendors, a separate term they're calling. So what is that you have experience, or can you show any light on this vendor and customer relationship where there is a diversity is playing a role?
Yeah, so organizations, when they're asked about their diversity numbers, it's not enough to say, we're X% diverse overall. You've got to break it down by levels of leadership, functions, critical roles. And so, because that's what's more telling in terms of ensuring that you're moving people through the pipeline. So you're right. Customers are also saying, well, what about your vendors? Because that's part of your ecosystem. And we want to make sure that you are investing in organizations that are that result in advancing diversity. And so, are you using minority-owned, women-owned, et cetera, organizations as your vendors? And absolutely, I'm definitely seeing requests and mandates for that.
Yeah. So I think it is really fantastic to know. So as we are just coming closer to the end of this session. So I want to talk about two topics. One is, for all the viewers, what are is there any list of the organization would like to put a list here, or the slide or anything, where people can go into their websites or any information if you have? And also, in a year, what are the main events which you are seeing in the US, at least, where people must go? Anything you can think of those things?
So you're asking about organizations they should look into?
Yeah, the organizations where people can seek out for help for the diversity and inclusion, and also organizations seek out for any of the specific conferences where they can probably go and network and learn from other organizations. Anything which comes to your mind?
Which, of course, in the age of COVID, as you and I were talking earlier, everything is going virtual. But there are, I've attended the CEO Action conference. I guess that was last winter when it was still face to face. And they're online now.
Now
They're
it becomes
virtual.
like face to face is like a one boon, right?
I
Those
know.
things are gone. Now
They
people,
are. They're
oh, I
gone.
didn't really meet you in person.
I know. Yeah. So I would say, look at the events that CEO Action and Paradigm for Parity are running. There's Diversity Inc. You mentioned the National Diversity Council as we were getting started, so I would look
Yeah.
into something like that. As far as organizations go, and I can share that list of the Diversity Inc. top 50.
Yeah, I think
If
you
people
should
just
share
want to
that.
go to that and look into those organizations, they talk about the kinds of things that they're doing, so you can learn from them or get in touch with people within the organization. I would do that as well.
Yeah, I know. I know. I think one thing I know, I was being invited to some of these board meetings for different companies.
Hmm.
One of the thing in a board meetings, I have realized, or at least was happy that now people are adding this. One of the strategy or one of your parameter or the KPI, what we call as how much you are involved in the organizational level and also in the community level, embracing this diversity and inclusion. So
Yeah.
I think that is definitely good to know that the leaders in different organizations are thinking that as one of the metric to make sure each of their succession plan or other people to promote to different levels. I
Hmm.
think that is definitely good. But anything, do you see this diversity has to be part of the HR or is it kind to be separate? Any idea you have?
It really depends on the size of the organization. I will say
Okay.
that. So where it sits, it usually either sits with HR talent or in an office that reports directly to the president.
Uh,
Um, so either way, it needs to have a direct link to the office of the president, the CEO, because the CEO needs to own equity, diversity, and inclusion in their organization, and not make that just the responsibility of HR talent.
I think you nailed it down. So I think it is really coming from the C-suite and the CEO as being the top person to make it, and then only it will happen. No, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely
Yep.
right. So just in the interest of the time, so we're just going to a closing. So can you say what would be your closing remarks and what are the takeaways from this session to any of the people who are watching us around the globe?
Well, I'm excited that you offered this session for your organization and for your customers. I think that this is you extending your network to bring this kind of education and knowledge into your customer base is really important. I love seeing that. I love seeing when organizations are doing that, because they're not only focused on themselves and what they need to do, but it's about creating a broader system and community of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I think that really is an important thing that you're doing, and I appreciate that. I We're struggling, across the world. Organizations are struggling with this question of equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's not easy. If it were easy, it would have been solved centuries ago,
Yeah.
but the fact that we're struggling through it is important, and we need to, uh, as organizational leaders, give ourselves grace, but also challenge ourselves to continue to move through and have to do the really hard work that it takes to create organizations that can sustain diversity because they are equitable and inclusive.
That's true. No, I think it is definitely. I really like my takeaway from this meeting is the equity. You really nailed it out. We are not really thinking mostly about the diversity and the inclusion, but not really bringing the mix of the equity and then the way what you have really given. It is really helpful. So from the Informatica point of view, we have been really going through these challenging times around the globe with this pandemic, and this
Hmm.
also gave us an opportunity virtually connect with people across the globe. So I think the positive side of this COVID is we are able to make many sessions. And also because me at a CIO level, I do a lot of travel. I'm not really getting time to spend either with my family or with employees or with the customer because it is always about travel.
Hmm.
But with the virtual, it is giving us more opportunity to talk to many people in the community, in the employees, in the customer prospects. So that has really generated a lot of the brainstorming sessions within our leadership, saying that, what else we can really do in embracing this diversity and inclusion. And also, as we say, that it is not just for the business, as the humanity, right? You really need to show that empathy, and you need to have the humility towards this important factor, because it is driving this entire world on these things. And the transparency, and then what you speak is what you follow. There are many things will come into this diversity. So we really want to do this kind of a sessions, and I was really looking for the fantastic leader, because when I was in Verizon, I really got so much valuable things from this Center for Creative Leadership. And then when I really get to know you, get to interact with you, I thought, you would be a perfect person to really give us some kind of insights. And as I said, it is the recipe of the success to be a great leader in these difficult times, and lead the diversity and inclusion now with equity for a sustainable diversity. So I really appreciate Jennifer taking your valuable time and giving us a fantastic. And then again, as I said, this is just a beginning, and then we will be doing more and more sessions. And then I also got a lot of the feedback while we are talking this session from different customers and the prospects and the employees. I think we need to have more and more closed group conversations, and then people also really want to voice about it, because this being a webinar, again, as I asked you some questions in the similar to that, people really want to be very careful what we want to say and how we want to say, and we don't want to be really captured. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And then for all the viewers and the people around the globe, I want to say one thing. All these discussions, again, are all about what personally, as a Swami, I have gone through my experiences, and then I am sharing it. And also from Jennifer, it is all about Jennifer's idea. So we're not trying to copy something, or we are not trying to say something, or we're not degrading, because there is always a possibility. Whatever we say, it is, if a glass is half full, people can say it is half full or half empty. It is all about that positive attitude. We want all the viewers to think about it. All these ideas are just our own ideas and experiences. It's not saying they're all perfect, but they are definitely are leading towards the positive impact. So please reach out to us for any of the information you have, any questions on these comments. And Jennifer, if you can also share your slide with your contact information here, then people can also look into, and then you can feel free to reach out to Jennifer. So she is in North Carolina, at a beautiful place where we all live in North Carolina. We love it where we live.
We do.
So,
do you want me to pull up the slide with my contact info on it?
Yeah, please, why don't you do that? And then again, thanks everyone. I really want to thank all the backend, my team, Informatica, Sai, my HR and operations team is putting really towards it. And also the Bala project manager and my team, Aditya, Karthik, Anant, and Rakesh. So there are many people behind the scenes who are really putting this together at only one goal: how we all can embrace this diversity and inclusion in this particular time. And with this, we really want to end it. And we also want to make sure you all are staying safe and healthy, and make sure you follow all the guidelines on your respective countries and government rules and regulations, and wear mask, and maintain the social distance, because we all have to work towards ending this pandemic. Then only we all can have those wonderful moments back, because it is becoming more precious meeting in person. So we really want to make sure all that is coming back. So thank you all, and have a rest of the day. Fantastic